Let me give you what I think are 5 essentials in your business that if you just do them every day, you're just going to do real good. By the way, my name's John. I'm your friend. I want you to do real good. So let's look at what really matters, because you see what happens is this. When you do the 5 things that really are essential every day, that's when you begin to have incredible success. So what are those? What really matters? What do you need to do every day in your business? Okay, here they are. Number 1, growth matters. Your personal growth, your personal development is essential to your success as a realtor. No doubt about it. You cannot give what you do not have. You got to be bigger on the inside so you can become bigger on the outside. It's all about developing myself, investing in me. I tell people all the time, the most important investment that you'll ever make in your life is in you. When I was in my mid-20s, my mentor sat down with me and basically taught me a principle that's life-changing. He said, John, growth is not automatic. If you're going to grow, you're going to have to grow on purpose. You're going to have to be intentional in it. By the way, getting older, that's automatic. Getting better, that's not automatic. If you get better, you got to get better on purpose. You've got to be intentional in your personal development and in your personal growth. And why is that essential? It's very simple. Your business will grow to the size that you are. So from a 1 to a 10, if I'm a 5, my business will grow to a 5. It just will. There's no such thing as your business growing bigger than you are. It doesn't happen, never has happened. It's not going to happen with you. It didn't happen with me. So as I go, the business goes. As I grow, the business grows. People ask me all the time, well, how do I grow my business? Very simple. You grow your people. You grow your people. Now you can grow your business, because the only guarantee that tomorrow is going to be better is that you're growing today. That's the only guarantee. So if you have great hope for tomorrow, the hope should be not based upon what you think the forecast for homes are. The hope should be based on the fact I'm getting better. And if I'm getting better, I'm going to do better. And if I do better, my business is going to be better. It just works that way. That's why personal growth, your development, investing in you is essential. If you were in my home office right now, to the right of my desk, about 10 feet, is my first purchase of investing in me. It was a goal-setting purchase that was from Success Motivation Institute out of Waco, Texas. It cost me $799, which back in the 70s was 1 month of my salary. It took me 6 months to save up the money. And I hold it and keep it right there in a visible position, because that was one of the greatest investments I ever made in my life. That investment's returned millions of dollars to me. Millions. For $799, it's returned millions of dollars. It's just huge. But it was my first investment in me, because it taught me goal setting. It taught me how to develop and grow myself and how to achieve things. And it just made me a better person so that I could have a bigger business. That's for you. That's for me. That's all of it. So one of the 5 essentials in the power of 5 is personal growth. It matters. Every day you want to personally grow. The second part, number 2 of the power of 5, is connection. Connection matters. Connecting with people, relating well to them. I wrote a book a few years ago called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. I love that book. And it talks about the fact, how do you do more than communicate with people? How do you and I really connect with them? And this is essential, because what happens is this. As a leader, we have to find the people before we can lead the people. Oh my. You see, a lot of people, they just try to lead, but they don't find. You know this as well as I do. When you take a client to a potential house that they may want to buy, you've got to know the house. Of course, you can't have to do that, but you got to know the person that you're taking through that house. You got to know what they like, what motivates them. When I teach leadership, I talk about what I call the 7 motivations of people's lives, because we're not all motivated by the same thing. And if I'm going to lead a person well, I don't lead them according to what motivates me. I lead them according to what motivates them. And so I've got to ask questions. I can't just assume. Assumptions, the mother of all leadership mess ups. I've got to find them. And how do I find them? How do I find what motivates them? By asking questions. I was in New York City, and I was doing several press interviews and media stuff. And it was interesting. One of the reporters asked me the question. They said, "John, what's the difference in your leadership now than it was, 30 years ago?" And I said, well, the biggest difference is when, 30, 40 years ago, I led by direction. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. And so I just got people on my leadership train and said, "That's the hill, let's go get it." Today, I lead by asking questions. Because what I discovered was that not everybody wanted to go to the same hill I wanted to go, and not everybody wanted to go for the same reason. When I was young, I didn't know that. I thought everybody thought like I did. They had my perspective. And I learned over the years that what I need to do as a leader isn't start leading, it's start finding. And how do I start finding? I start finding by asking questions. If I were in your business, I would get to know the person that I'm taking to the house as well as I knew the house. In fact, I can almost tell you, if you even got to be a little bit lopsided, I would be lopsided on what does that person really want? What's that client really? What's going to motivate them to purchase that home? You got to find them before you lead them. Connecting with people really matters. And let me give you another thing that really matters in this Power of Five, and that is mindset. How you and I think. In fact, the greatest separator between successful and unsuccessful people is how they think. The greatest separator. I didn't say how smart you were. I said it's how you think. This is the huge gap. People that are successful think totally different than people who are not successful. I wrote a book several years ago called How Successful People Think, and I identified the 11 thinking patterns of successful people that separate them from everybody else. It's just an absolute fact. My father died this July 4th of this year. He was 98. He was an amazing man, an amazing leader. And one time, I'm talking about 50 years ago, he and I had a discussion on what made him successful. And he said, "John, I think differently than others." And he told me the story. He grew up in a little town in southern Ohio, Georgetown. And everybody was poor except 3 families. And he was a high-energy kid who loved to work. And so in the 7th, 8th grade, high school, he did chores for those 3 families in that little town. So he got to be around them, and he kept asking himself, why are they so successful and why are the rest of us so poor? He said, as a junior, I came to the conclusion that those 3 families thought differently than the rest of us. And he said, it put me on a journey of understanding the power of thinking correctly. Now, I wish I had an hour on this with you, because there's just depth to what I want to talk to you about that I don't have time in this setting. But you just have to trust me. The way that you think, framing every situation you're in, every client, every home that you're wanting to present, it all begins with thinking. For example, I wish I could give you the things to think on. I've got a whole list of things that help you to be successful in your thinking. But let me just, I only have time for a couple of them. But for example, here's my mindset. There's always an answer. You say, John, what do you mean there's always an answer? What I mean is very simple. There's always an answer. I know a lot of people don't have answers, but there's an answer that, they just don't have it yet. Now, I know that to be a fact. In fact, I know that there is not always an answer. I know the second thing is there's usually more than one answer. In other words, there's almost more than one way to almost accomplish anything that's important in life, but there's always an answer. I always live on the other side of yes. Now, what does that do? It allows me to see the possibilities, not the problems so much. Now let me explain this. Here's the difference. There's a difference between these 2 questions. I'm going to give them to you, and let's see if immediately you can tell the difference. There's a difference between me asking myself, can I? And asking myself, how can I? That's the gap I'm talking about between successful and unsuccessful people. Unsuccessful people ask the question all the time, can I? Can I? Well, I don't see a way. I don't think so. Can I? I don't know. You see, when I'm asking, can I open the door for excuses. When I ask the question, can I open the door for obstacles and barriers, to get in my way. But the moment I switch to how can I, now I've already settled it that I'm going to do it. I'm no longer in can I land. Now I'm in how can I? I've always said I'm going to get it done. There is an answer. I'm going to find the answer. Now the question is, how am I going to find that? It's there. I'm going to get it. Now, can you not see the difference? And I promise you, this is the difference in your business between people who succeed and people who drop out. I mean, you're in COVID-19. This is you got to have a how can I mindset. If you have a can I mindset, you're done in this work. I tell you, it's over because you're going to see too many problems. But remember this, every opportunity has always been disguised as a problem. Opportunities just don't come out in front of you like neon signs in Las Vegas on the strip that says opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. If it was that blatant and that clear, everybody would seize the opportunity. The reason people don't seize the opportunity is because it's almost always disguised in problems and challenges and difficulties. They say, well, God, I don't want to go there. I mean, they're not a how can I person, and so they don't go there, and they don't open the door of problems to find out where the opportunities are. The other day, a guy came to me and said, you know what? I think I lost an opportunity last month. Oh, I said, don't worry about it. I said, somebody found it. Yeah. You see, if you live on that can I world, you let opportunities pass you every day, but it's okay. There are people all around you that are asking, how can I? And they'll pick it up. The opportunity is never lost. It's just that you didn't get it, and you didn't get it because your thinking wasn't correct. If I had time, wow. If I had time, another one I would give you, this is huge. Failure and success, they go together. Don't separate them. You see, the whole world separates success and failure, and they put failure way over here, and they put success way over here to the right, and basically they said, boy, you want to be successful and you don't want to fail? Hello? What world do they live in? Everybody that succeeds fails. They succeed because in their failing, they learn from their failure. Hello? And failure is a huge learning tool. It's a great asset in your life. You never want to omit it out of your life. You want to realize that it's there to teach you something. It's going to make a difference for you, and it's just absolutely amazing once you put them together. So when you fail, you say, "Okay, I'm going to learn to fail forward." I read a book a few years ago called "Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn." The value of failure is learning. I was talking the other day to a CEO, second largest tech company in the world. And he was talking to me about, in their incredible success, all of the difficulties, the challenges, the losses, the failures. And I asked him, I said, well, would you like to go back and do some of those over? We'd like to take that decision that was kind of not a good decision and do it over. That's a question. All of us would like to have do-overs in our life, wouldn't we? We wouldn't like to go back and say, oh, I wish I could have another shot at that. And interesting enough, when I asked him if he would like to go back and do any of them over, he said no. Wow. No? You don't want to do any of them over? He said, no, John. He said, because in my mistakes, failures, my losses, I learned so much. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my company. I learned a lot about what doesn't work. He said, I am the person I am today because I learned from my failures. In fact, he said, the inner core of who I am, the character, it's all out of the difficult days. He said, if I went back and could do them over, I would have lost the lessons. And if I'd have lost the lessons, I'd have lost the inner core and character I got. And I don't want to trade that. No, I'll take the losses. I'll take the message. You see, he understands failure and success go together. So when people talk about something they failed in, okay, I listened to their story, okay, let the violin play. When they're done talking about the failure, I only have one question to ask you. We already talked about your failure. Are you done? The question is, what did you learn? If you didn't learn something out of that failure, you're going to mess up again in the same area. But if you learn something from it, now you can improve yourself. And now all of a sudden, you're a different person. Take the steps of failure to go up to success. That's what you do. That's what all successful people do. Don't separate them. I could go on and on about things that you need to think on that separate you from people who don't think correctly. So I got two more I've got to give you. Leading matters. That's number 4. Leading matters. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Always has, always will. I wrote a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It's the most successful selling book of leadership in the history of the world. Millions of copies sold, 50-some different languages. One of the laws is the law of the lid, and basically the law of the lid says how well you lead determines how well you succeed. I can tell you right now, if you lead well as a realtor, you succeed well. If you don't lead well, you won't. Let me visually explain quickly the law of the lid. If this is my leadership lid, this is how well John Maxwell leads. This is my leadership ability, my skills. Let's say from 1 to 10 on average, it's a 5. What I want you to understand, if this is my leadership lid, my business, my business, your business, it'll be a 4. I got a leadership lid. That my business can't get up above that leadership lid. Can I tell you something? In the history of mankind, no business has ever passed the leadership lid of its organization and kept growing. Never has happened before, so it's not going to happen with you. When I'm doing leadership, people ask me all the time, John, are our leaders born? I always give them the same answer. Of course they are. I've never met an unborn leader. What they're really asking is, are you born as a leader or can you learn leadership? You can learn to lead. I've taught 6 million leaders in every country of the world how to lead. Our organizations, we're the largest equipping leadership organization in the world. We got this down. You can learn to lead. Now, here's what's beautiful. Let's go back to my illustration. If you're a 5 as a leader, what's your organization? What's your business going to be? It's going to be a 4. It's not going to be a 6. Not going to be 7. You say, well, I'm going to change companies. It doesn't matter. The company isn't going to determine your success. It's your leadership's going to. It's your leadership that's your lead. So if you're a 5, but you can learn to lead. You're a 5, so all of a sudden you start developing your leadership skills. You go from a 5 to a 6 to a 7 to 8. Now what am I doing? The lid is lifted. Now what happens now when I do my business? Now that there's no lid, my business just follows my leadership. Always has, always will. That's why leading matters. That's why every day you want to lead well. That's why you want to learn how to lead well. If you're trying to develop leaders in your company, I would encourage you to get a book I wrote a few years ago called The 5 Levels of Leadership. Life-changing. Life-changing. It'll help you understand leadership's a verb, not a noun. It'll tell you how to go from one level to another, but even more importantly, it'll tell you how to take the people in your office and your team and take them up to another level also. So leading matters. Just like mindset matters. Of course it does. How I think. These are everyday essentials in your life and my life. Can I give you the 5th one on the power of 5? And that is because this is an absolute fact also. Significant matters. Significance matters. You see, success is about me. What I've done, my career, how much money I make, how I provide for my family. By the way, I want you all to be successful. I'm not anti-success. But you have to understand something about success. That won't bring you any kind of happiness. Yesterday, I was in the studio all day with Steve Harvey. We were doing an entire day developing a digital product on how to connect with people. And in the time between shoots, Steve and I were talking about money and success and talking about all of his friends. He was talking about a billionaire friend of his that was highly unhappy, now even a little bit maybe suicidal. I've known a lot of people that have made a lot of money, but they're not happy. Because if you just live in the success world, it's too much about just you, to be honest with you. You see, success is about me and significance is about others. Success is about adding value to John Maxwell. Significance is about adding value to you. And the moment that you begin to live your life intentionally wanting to add value to others, you get fulfillment and satisfaction that you really aren't going to find in any other place. That's a fact. You see, I've met a lot of unhappy, successful people. I've never met an unhappy, unfulfilled person that was significant. Significance takes us to a whole new level of living. And I want that for you. I want you to be very successful in your business. I want you to make a lot of money. Of course I do. But I want you to understand, with one trifling exception, the world is composed of others, like maybe 7.5 billion others. And it's when you get in others' world and become your brother, your sister's keeper, that all of a sudden you begin to have that incredible, unbelievable fulfillment. So we started our teaching by talking about a tree. Know what you want to accomplish, have the right tool, take action, stay focused, and be consistent. And then we went to your business. And we pretty much said that if you can do these 5 things in your business, if you can personally grow, if you connect well with people, if you have a mindset that is incredibly abundant, if you can lead well, and if you can pursue significance, if you can do those 5 things, then, my friend, you will do well. In fact, you will do very well. And that's what I want for you. That's what the association wants for you. They want you to do very, very well. So thanks for listening.
So the question is, not only do I grow, but what do I grow in? And what I grow in is what I call the big picture. I think there are 4 things that allow people to be successful. And I think these 4 things you've got to be good at. You've got to be good at relationships. In other words, you've got to connect with people. People won't go along with you if they can't get along with you. You just got to be good with relationships. You've got to be good with equipping people. You've got to know how to train and develop people, because you can't compound anything in your life unless you get somebody else to do it with you. So all compounding is in training and equipping. You've got to be good in attitude, because attitude, if it's good, will let you overcome adversity, which everyone has, and if it's bad, it'll let adversity overcome you. And you've got to be good in leadership. You've got to be able to influence more people. Now, I think those 4 things you just got to be good at, regardless of what your profession is, what your calling is, what your career is. You better be good with relationships. You better be good with equipping. You better be good with attitude, and you better be good with leadership. At age 25, I decided those were the 4 keys to continual success in a person's life. And then when I started writing books, I said, I'll write about those 4 things all the time. If it's a John Maxwell book, it's in those areas right there, because that's the key to people's success. What keeps people buying my books is I'm constantly writing about something that will make them better. And it works for them. Now, you take those 4 things, plus take your giftedness or your strengths. You ought to grow in that area. Whatever you're gifted in. For example, I'm gifted in communication, so I read a lot of books on communication. So whatever your strength is, you want to, but your growth has to be focused on those 4 or 5 things in your life. Now, it doesn't mean you can't grow in any other thing. It just means your greatest return for growth will be if you stay in those sweet spots. And then you need to measure your growth, because what gets measured gets done. And so every year at the end of the year, I ask myself, how well did I do in this area? Am I getting better? Am I growing? Am I developing myself? How can I measure that? And then how can I apply what I'm learning? Because the moment that I learn something, the question I have is, how can I now apply that to my life, and how can I pass it on to the people that are on my team? That's how a leader thinks. How do I apply it to me? How do I pass it on to my people? That's why I'm so excited about you being here, because you all represent hundreds of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And everything that you're learning, you're saying, okay, here's how I apply this to me. This is how I work in my life. How do I apply it to the people on my team? And that's what we're here to help you do. We're here to help resource you to not only learn these principles yourself, but to learn it for your people. And then after I do all of that, I become intentional in the following things. Number one is I make growth my number one priority in my life. A day without growing is unacceptable to me. So I'm conscious of my need 24/7 to grow. And I'm constantly doing it. Number two, I look for growth opportunities in every situation. I not only make it my number one priority, but I ask myself, okay, what kind of growth opportunities are around me? Have I taken advantage of growth opportunities? Growth conversations. Number three, I ask questions that will help me grow. Growth doesn't come looking for me. I have got to be proactive. So I ask questions all the time about growth. And I'm asking, if I'm with you, I'm going to ask you, what are you reading? Who are you talking to? What experiences has caused you to grow? I'm just asking you questions all the time. I'll drive you crazy with questions. The last time Jim Collins and I got together, we were speaking at the same convention out in Las Vegas. We were having lunch, and he sat down, and I sat down, and I kid you not. We sat down, and we looked at each other, and we both pulled out our card. It was like quick draw McGraw here. And we just leaned forward because we knew. We had an hour and 15 minutes. We were going to cut all the other stuff out. He had questions asked me, I had questions asked him, and I threw out the first question. He said, that's not fair. He said, I have questions. I said, but I was first. So I get the first question. And we went back and forth, question. Why did we do that? Because Jim Collins and I know something. The only growing we're going to do isn't talking about where we've been, what we've done, who we know. Are you not tired of all that stuff? The only growing we're going to do is asking questions to the other person and learning from that person. Everything I've learned has become a result of a question, not a result of an answer. So you got to constantly have this curious mind to ask questions. So I ask questions that will help me grow. I file what I learn every day. Every day, I take what I'm learning and I file it in my iPhone. I put categories on it and I put it in there, what I'm learning and how I'm growing. And I make sure, as soon as I learn something from you, I put it in my iPhone immediately. Because the number one time waster is looking for things that are lost. And you know why you lost them? You didn't have a place to put them in the first place. So my systems give me the place to put things so I don't lose them, so that I can go back to them and I can learn from them and I can grow from it. And then I pass on to others every day. I pass on to others what I'm learning. I can hardly wait to tell somebody else, because every time I pass on to others what I've just learned, it reinforces the learning in me. And it allows me to kind of put that just a little stronger in my life, that impression just a little bit deeper in my life. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up by, I love this. Some parents of a little girl named Elizabeth Dodd, who was age 9. Her parents would listen to my teachings. They had video programs, and they were always listening, reading my books. And so their 9-year-old daughter was just kind of hanging with them and picking up this stuff. And so this was written by Elizabeth Dodd, who's age 9. She said, John Maxwell says, always work on yourself more than others. He also says, always work on yourself before you work on others. I say, hey, he's right. Because if you work on others before yourself, you won't know what you're doing. Elizabeth Dodd, age 9. I thought, the kid gets it. The kid gets it. I hope we get it today. I hope we get it. People know me for leadership, but I'm passionate for growth. And the reason I'm passionate for growth is if you're going to develop the leader within you, trust me, It's going to be because you want to get better every day. And what's so beautiful is if you'll do this, in 1 year, to be honest with you, you won't recognize yourself. You'll have to reintroduce yourself to yourself. And you're going to have to say, I'm amazed how much you've grown in a year. What keeps me young is my passion to grow. I just don't have time to die. And it's so good, I don't want to die. That's what I want for you.
Another thing that you said that I would love for you to talk about, well, you talked about goals and systems.
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
And in the goals and systems, the way you said it was better than the way I said it. But let me just give you a little background. When I started off as a young leader, I set a lot of goals. I took goal setting seminars and did goal setting practices. And then one day I began to understand that I would hit a goal, and then I kind of look and say, well, what's next? And I felt that there was a missing piece, and so I kind of shifted from being goal oriented to growth oriented. I still had goals in my life, but I said, I want to grow in this area. I want to grow in the leadership lane. And so, but when I saw that you talked about the systems, which are the processes, it's the process. I love that because I felt when you spoke of that this is a big miss with a lot of people, that they are kind of outside directed with the goals and they don't have that process, that system that allows them to really long-term sustain and continue to go beyond because I say if you're growth oriented, you'll hit a goal and you'll say that's nice, but you just keep on going because it's bigger than that. If you're goal oriented, sometimes you say, what do I do next? Okay, pick up on that one and take us to a new level, James.
Well, I mean, first of all, this is coming from someone who was very goal-oriented for a long time. I think in a lot of ways, everything I write in Atomic Habits is actually a little reminder to myself. I make all of these same mistakes that everybody else makes. And so I kind of am coming up with these ideas because I need them. But I came across this sheet of paper a couple years ago, and it had a list of goals that I had written out to myself, like maybe 10 years prior. And it was kind of interesting looking through them with that much distance from them, because maybe 30% of the list or something were things that I had accomplished. And then the rest of the list were things I hadn't. And my first thought looking at it was, well, clearly writing the goal down wasn't the thing that made the difference. Like obviously if that would have been the secret, then I should have just hit them all. And what I realized looking at it was the ones that I made progress on were the ones that I had some kind of system around. And we often tell these stories about behavior change and habits and how hard it is to build new habits, how difficult it is to change your behavior and all of that. And one of the stories that we will tell is something like, well, maybe if you really wanted it, maybe if you had better goals, maybe if you had more discipline, maybe if you had more grit. And, I don't know that that's quite right. Certainly those are important qualities in life. But I think many people, certainly most people like listening to this conversation right now, genuinely do want to improve, genuinely do want to perform at a high level. So what I would say is if you're struggling to improve, the problem isn't you. The problem is your system. We don't change, not because we don't want to change, but because we have the wrong system for change. And I think we can even go a step further and say, listen, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So often in life, we're told you need to be more ambitious, set a bigger goal, think bigger, 10x your vision. And thinking big has its place. Like I consider myself to be someone who thinks big, but the truth is setting the goal is kind of the easy part. Like I'm an author, right? Like I could set a goal to sell 100 million books. It took me 3 seconds. Like the goal is not the hard part. It's building a system of behaviors that executes and carries you toward that outcome. And so what I would say is, if I was going to put a little finer point on this language, what do I mean by goal and system? Your goal is your desired outcome, the target, the thing you're shooting for. What is your system? It's the collection of daily habits that you follow. And if there is ever a gap between your goal and your system, if there's ever a gap between your desired outcome and your daily habits will always win. Almost by definition, your current habits are perfectly designed to deliver your current results. So whatever system you've been running, whatever collection of habits you've been following for the last, say, 6 months or year or 2 years, it's carried you almost inevitably to the outcomes that you have right now. And that's kind of one of the great ironies of life. We also badly want better results. We also badly want to make more money or reduce stress or be more productive or get in shape. But the results are not actually the thing that needs to change. It's like fix the inputs and the outputs will fix themselves. Design a better system, create a better collection of daily habits, and you'll be carried kind of naturally to a different destination. And that's why sometimes I'll say, like, goals are for people who care about winning once. Systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly. If you want to get results again and again, then it's the system that drives you forward. So that's kind of my little take on systems and goals.
I love what you just said there. That was great. I'll write that down and give you credit somewhere.
That's great. That's great.
So let's stay a little bit kind of in that same territory, because one of the things I loved about Atomic Habits, James, it makes sense. It just makes sense. When you read it, you not only can understand it and apply it, it makes sense. And when you talked about the difference between becoming outcome-based or identity-based on goals and where you're going, when I read that whole section, I thought that is right and reasonable. And, I've got a cigarette habit and I'm trying to quit smoking versus I don't smoke. I mean, that I felt was just very impacting. So take us there a little bit, would you please?
Well, I think this is pretty natural. I certainly have done it many times before. A lot of the time when you want to change something or get a better result, you'll sit down and first you start thinking about, what do I want to achieve? So what outcome do I want? And then if you go a little bit beyond just dreaming about the outcome, you say, okay, well, I need some kind of plan. I need some sort of process for this. And so you might say, just as an example, I want to lose 40 pounds. And so my plan is I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week and I'm going to eat this new diet and so on. And usually it kind of stops there. And the implicit assumption kind of behind all of this is, if I can follow this plan and get that result, then I'll be the kind of person that I want to be, or I'll be happier with who I am, or I'll be more satisfied with my results or something like that. And what I encourage in chapter 2 of the book is, let's maybe flip that on its head for a minute and just say, hey, why don't we just start by asking ourselves, not what do I want to achieve, but rather who do I wish to become? And then you can build your habits around that identity and let that process kind of carry you forward. And then whatever results happen to bubble up along the way are the results that come along the way. And so I sort of think of it kind of like the layers of an onion. The outermost layer is your outcomes. One layer in is your process. And then the core of the onion is your identity. And what I've found is that, and I think many readers would agree with this, the concept of trying to build identity-based habits, of starting with who do you wish to become, is more resilient for them because they can kind of carry it around from situation to situation. So for example, one reader, she had this concept of this identity of, what would a healthy person do? And then whenever she walked around, she would just ask herself that question all day. What would a healthy person do? Would they order the salad or order the burger and fries? What would a healthy person do? Would they walk, 5 blocks to the next meeting, or would they catch a cab, or, whatever? And they can walk around all day long with that kind of identity in their mind. And that gives them a lens to make their daily decisions. And they start to feel more aligned with becoming the kind of person they want to be. Now, my big takeaway for this, and I think the way in which it ties into all of the concepts in Atomic Habits and the strategies for building small habits and getting better, is that your behavior provides evidence of your identity. And so every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become. So no, doing one push-up does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And no, writing one sentence may not finish the novel, but it does cast a vote for, I'm a writer. And individually, those actions are small things, but collectively you start to build up this body of evidence for the type of person you are and what you stand for. And ultimately, I think this is the real reason that habits matter. which is they provide evidence for who you are. You know, we often talk about habits as mattering because of the external results they'll get you. Hey, they'll help you make more money or reduce stress or whatever. But the real reason they matter is they shape your sense of self. They kind of shape that narrative, that story that you have about who you are and what you do. And habits are not the only things in life that influence that picture or that story. But by virtue of being repeated day in and day out, habits provide the bulk of the evidence. They play a really significant role in shaping the way you see yourself. And so once you start to believe that you're that kind of person, you have every reason in the world to stick with the behavior. You know, like, especially once you take pride in it. I always joke, like, if you take pride in the size of your biceps, you never skip arm day at the gym, and once you start to take pride in a certain habit, it becomes easier to stick to it. Like the person who views themselves as, I am a runner, they don't have to motivate themselves to go for a run in the same way that somebody who's just getting started might. It's kind of like, no, like, this is just part of what I normally do. It's part of who I am. And so ultimately, I think that's where we're trying to get to. Now, it's hard to flip a switch on day one and just change your identity overnight. It usually doesn't happen that way. It's a gradual thing. It requires the casting of many votes, to continue that metaphor, and building up a body of evidence. But I do think it's possible. And a lot of the other tools and strategies in the book maybe can give you the short-term motivation that you need to get to that long-term place of kind of reshaping your story or shaping your identity.
In other words, I take risks now financially. Just recently, in the last couple of years, we've bet everything in a belief that we can make our future bigger, better, brighter. And I'll be honest with you, I signed these documents, I mortgaged house, I did all this stuff, and I didn't even think about it. I'm like, wow, I've lost everything before. There's a rebound in me. And so I never want to lose that and allow acquired possessions to stop me from risking those for the future and the betterment of others around me. And so that would be one example. When you go through that, and I was there because of some mistakes. I did not have to go the destitute route. I made mistakes to get there. But one of my takeaways from that is monetary possessions and financial gain is nothing but a tool to do greater impact. It is not a controlling mechanism to stop me from risking greater impact in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's critical to point out here, crucial to point out here to our listeners. I think they can hear you say that and think, maybe they're assuming. I'm going to make an assumption here. You might be listening and think, oh, Mark Cole can do that. He has the means to make those big steps and mortgage his house or buy all in and not think about it because there's a big safety net underneath there. But what you're saying is you have actually taken away the safety net when you do those things. You aren't leaving a little safety net. You are going all in on something. And these are big deals and big all-ins. And you don't just wake up one day and you get to go big all in. It starts in the potato chip counting days when you don't have a whole lot and you go all in, when there isn't a whole lot to lose, but you're kind of saving your face, saving skin, saving your reputation and what your parents might think or your family might think or your reputation. And those little steps that you took back then when you didn't have a lot to lose, but food for the week, built your security, your confidence to where you can get to that place today. So I think there are probably listeners who might downplay those risks that you take to go all in. And I don't think we can do that fairly without understanding that it's been a whole process to get you there. So I'm thinking now, let's say we have people who, let's flip it a little bit. Maybe they're leading people who are frozen with the fear of making mistakes. And if they don't know their people well enough, which it's really important that we know the people that we lead, they might not understand what is holding them back, those fears that are maybe rooted in childhood and rooted in something in young adulthood that have them, gripped with fear from making a mistake in their professional life. So can you talk a little bit to leaders who are leading people who, or maybe a whole group of people in their organization who are gripped with fear and who aren't taking necessary steps or risks in their professional lives that are necessary in order for the team to move forward? How does a leader move the team forward if they're gripped with fear of mistakes?
I think that you really got to grasp what John's saying in point number 2. Don't make the biggest mistake of all, which is doing nothing. I love what you said. There is no safety net when you're going all in. That defies the whole concept of being all in, pot committed,
Right.
over it. There's no safety net. I'm out if this
Right.
doesn't work. Somebody else has to come and step in because I couldn't make it work. And I think that we've got to get that mindset, because oftentimes we risk what we can manage rather than risk what we can't manage. And when we risk what we can't manage, that's all in, and that's making a decision. I'm not going to sit here and do nothing. And that I think that's the biggest thing, Tracy, to capture in this lesson is, what is it? John, in the middle of this lesson that he's talking right now, he said he was asked the question a long time ago, what would you try if you knew failure wasn't an option? What a great question. Remember that? You've been asked that question. It's one of those questions. What's the 2 greatest days of a person's life? It's one of those rhetorical questions we've heard over and over again. What would you risk if you knew failure wasn't an option? Or what would you try? John said, I've got a better question for us. What would you risk if you knew failure was going to happen, but you would learn from it? Oh, so there's something so big that I can go in and calculate. I'm probably not going to make it, but it's going to be okay. That's the mindset that we're after, because I believe back to this quote I used at the very beginning, failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of success. Ariana, that is exactly right. Ariana Huffington had it right. Success and failure are not opposite, they are codependent. For you to really be successful in your life is going to mean how big you are in your failures. John said it. What was it? Point number 7 says, remember that the size of the person, not the size of her mistakes, determines success or failure. Failure is not failure if you become better in the middle of it. Or failure is not final if you become better in the middle of the experience. That one thing, if I could release all of you from feeling like failure is final and failure is defining of who you are, I believe those are the 2 greatest sources of fear that stops people from trying something so big that failure is probable.
I agree. Well, I will let you close this out, but I just wanted to give one more encouragement to our friends. Whether you're watching or listening, you might be having your mind blown a little bit, and a little bit of fear is creeping in. Like, dare I believe this? Dare I trust John enough to take me to this next place? And I just want to encourage you. His last point was, allow your mistakes to take you to the next level. Let your attitude about your mistakes, forgive yourself, leave it in the past. It's in the past. Leave it there. Don't carry it into your future, friends. And let this be something that really, your attitude, let it determine the altitude of where you go, friends. We're for you.
So many of you, thanks, Tracy. So many of you are listening to this and going, wow, when's John's book on return on failure coming out? I need that. And guess what? You're going to have to wait. But I know out of literally thousands of new listeners and viewers every single week, I know that there's new people out there to John's world. And there's a book that he's written on this that I believe will really help you. One is, it's right behind Tracy right there. She's got it all set up for us. But it's also this book I'm holding in my hand. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And really it helps with the attitude, the perspective with which we deal with failure. I've asked our team if you would give them a discount, if the team would give you a discount as the podcast family, and they have. And so in the show notes, we're going to include a link to be able to order this book. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. We're going to give you a 15% discount when you use the keyword podcast. So make sure that you put that in there for the discount that you will receive. I will tell you, I would recommend you buy a half a dozen, and resource your team with a perspective, especially those of you that are trying audacious, BHAG things in 2022. Get your team to understand failure is not final, and that's the way to do that. There's 2 other episodes that I want to encourage you to listen to and point you toward that will help you with the same subject matter. One is Redefining Failure. It's a podcast we did not too long ago. And then the other is Failure is Not Final. Both of those podcast links can be found in the show note. And really, here's what we're trying to explain to you today. Our standout statement is this: fail forward. Make something happen that is so big that when it doesn't work out exactly how you want it to, you're big enough to stand that test. Hey, we have always, over the last few weeks, we've been highlighting listener comments or listener questions, and today is no exception. Your feedback, your passing the podcast along to others is the fuel that gets Tracy and I up on days like today, excited to come in here because we see and sense and smell and taste and can actually experience impact that's happening. I went back, and Jake, thanks for providing this. Albert Einstein's quote, "Try not to become a person of success, rather become a person of value." And I love that, Tracy, because, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes here, because I really resonate with John's lesson today, and I love how he shared it's a risky statement. When I first heard it, I was like, success is for everyone. And I made a joke here. Success all around. I'm buying success today. Let me spread it around. And we kind of laughed about that. Yep. But then as I heard John teach, I went back to my story. And I went back to a story that perhaps those of you that listen to the podcast, you're very familiar with. I truly joined John Maxwell's team on May 1st of the year 2000. Bankrupt relationally, bankrupt financially. I wasn't giving any money. I wasn't making any money. I had no generosity in me. I think I still had a spirit, an attitude of generosity, but I had very little. I didn't bring any relational equity to the table. Nobody gave me a great reference that got me in the door. I had to introduce myself to every soul on the team because nobody knew me. In other words, I walked into an environment and I didn't bring very much. And now look what this environment has given me. I've went from the stock room to now getting to co-own things with John, be the CEO for the last 12 years. And I did a lesson recently that just underscores that I do believe this lesson, success is for everyone. I did a lesson with several thousand of our coaches, our Maxwell Leadership Certified coaches. And this was the lesson title, "If it can happen to me, it can happen to you." If I can do what I am doing today with as little as I brought to the table, then success can happen for you too. And I believe it's wrapped in these components of knowing your purpose in life, growing to your maximum potential, sowing seeds that benefit others. And Tracy, I know you have a story of extreme success. What I want to do here in this podcast is, one, make it believable. Success is for you. Success is for you. The second thing I want to make sure that we don't do is create a success gap. Tracy and I are at a perceived successful place in our life, and I don't want that to make success feel out of reach for you. Go back to the core definitions that John's given us. Apply that to you and begin, as Albert Einstein said, begin that journey of adding value, and success will follow. And so I sounded like I just closed the podcast right there, Tracy, and I really didn't. But that was so on my heart. I was like, I really want to get this out, because if it can happen to me, Mark Cole, I promise you it can happen for you too.
And I totally agree. And I love this lesson because it is both of our stories. And I feel like we can sometimes become numb to people who are in a perceived position of success and think something magical happened for them or whatever. And really, it's just consistent, unseen steps that have been taken in a certain direction in the areas that John talks about here. Because I'm the same way. When I first found John, I was 21 years old. I had not been to college. I was seeking out John because I wanted to grow, and I heard he was the guy to learn from. And so in these same 3 areas, and I even broke them down into even 4, because he says success is knowing my purpose in life, growing to my maximum potential, and sowing seeds that benefit others. But here's how I hear it. When I first came to John, I thought he was going to teach me, Mark, like, I don't know what I thought he was going to teach me. Things I didn't know, things I couldn't even title, you know? And what I heard was, number one, I need to discover my purpose. Number two, intentionally grow every day. Number three, practice generosity. And number four, add value to people. Guess what? I could do all four of those at 21 years old without a dollar to my name. And probably that day I did not have a dollar to my name. Yeah. And so I love that, because every single person, no matter what level of success you have today, as you're listening to this podcast, that you can do those four things today, no matter what age or stage you're in life today. And I love that so much.
Well, and you know, going to that, I'm going to give a shout out to our intern, Kyle Reisig, that's in studio with us today. He's just come and helping us for a period of time in between classes at college. And Kyle was asking, I love this, an intern that is asking questions his very first week. He's not soaking it all in. He's engaging. He was asking me a demographic question of our podcast listeners. And then I gave him kind of what age demographic information that we have in our world. And he said, let me tell you this. More of the students that I participate with, that I go to school with, needs to hear what I'm hearing in studio today. He said, we've got to figure out a way to get this podcast into the next generation, into the college age kids, into the high school kids. And his point is because this will help us. He's in that age group. This will help us set the courses in life that will make decisions that will lead us to a greater life of success and definitely a greater life of significance. And then, Tracy, you come out of this talk and say, hey, for me, it was 21 years old. I was at this shaping age, this age to where I wanted to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. And that's where you begin to set your course on these four attributes that you just shared. Love that.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me just say something before we aren't even to our first point yet, but let me just say, yesterday I was in the kitchen with my 16-year-old son, and I was making pasta, and he, you know how it goes with teenagers, the conversations just pop up when you're just doing regular life things. And it turned into a conversation very similar to this one, where he was trying to figure out something in his life, and he was processing it all in his own head. And he had said he had talked to some of his friends about it. And I had just said, like, buddy, you know what? This is the value of parents. It's not just to process it through your head, or other kids who are at your stage of life who can only see from 16 years old and less. Go higher. That's what the value of parents is. Talk to us and help us see, like, processing through maybe, you know, how you can add value in a different way and get your eyes off of yourself. I love this statement. That it's not that you should be thinking of less of yourself, but think of yourself less. That's generosity. And so don't think less of yourself. I don't want you to think less of yourself, but sometimes we need to think of ourselves less and look at other people. And that's when we really start to get in this first point is, how do I know my purpose in life? And I feel like there are podcast listeners, because I know this was me too. And so I know you can relate to this. I don't know if this was you, Mark, but I just didn't know my purpose in life for a while. I felt like it was this big, huge, abstract thing. And so I just started growing and trying to be generous in spirit. I didn't have a lot of money to be generous with, but I tried to be generous in spirit with my time. I started to be generous with the way that I spent my time with people. And the more I did that, the more I discovered my purpose. And so do you have any advice for people who are at that place where they want to dive into growth, but they don't really know their purpose yet? That age group, kind of what you were talking about, might not know their purpose yet.
Well, it's so funny as you were saying that. I number one, I'm going to question 1 and question 2 right here about how do I maximize my potential, which is where he talked about growth, Tracy. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here and you're going, yeah, for a while I didn't know my purpose. I'll be honest with you. It wasn't until 31 that I even knew I was supposed to know my purpose.
Have one.
It wasn't until about 32 or 33 before I realized, hey, I've got a purpose too. And then it was a little bit later than that when I could state my purpose. So let's be really clear. People like Kyle in the studio today, Javon, all these young men and women that I get to interact with that's seeking purposeful things, I'm going, You guys have no idea. You're a decade, if not more, ahead of me.
Yeah,
because I'm 30 years old, bebopping along, joining John Maxwell's team as an entry level. And somebody said, "What's your growth plan?" And I went, "I don't know." And then they said, "Well, what's your purpose?" And I went, "Purpose? To wake up, to eat, to find somebody that likes me?" I mean, this purpose question was so much bigger than me. Right. And so now let me tell you why I've got to link question, how do I know my purpose? And then 2, how do I grow to my maximum potential together? Mm-hmm. I have to do that. Because it was as I began to chart my course for growth that I began to realize my potential in life. Mm-hmm. I don't believe, based on my life, I spent 30 years living out a purpose, but guess what? It was everybody else's purpose for me. Yes. It wasn't my purpose. Yeah. And when you, young person, live a life, choose a career, and choose a relationship because everybody else in your life is pleased with that but you're on a train wreck. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of time. That's right. Because the purpose has got to resonate within you deeper, that when all odds are stacked against you, you mm-hmm. still chase your purpose. When everybody says, no, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, you still go after it. That's what a real purpose is. It is defiable against all odds and against all affirmation and confirmation of those around you. Mm-hmm. So for 30 years, Tracy, I lived on purpose. It was just somebody else's purpose. It wasn't mine. Right. Well, my life train wrecked. Mm-hmm. And then I began to realize that I didn't need to just have a purpose. I needed to have my purpose. Mm-hmm. And when I began an intentional path of growth each and every year, for 3 years, I just grew myself. I intentionally pursued growth. And in that intentional pursuit, I'll never forget it, the end of 2002, in a cabin in Blue Ridge, Georgia, I'm reviewing how I've grown the last 2 years. I'm setting the course of how I want to grow the next year. And boom. It clarified for me what my purpose was. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you what that is because we're talking about it, and perhaps some of you are new podcast listeners and haven't heard it. It's not going to sound that profound to you, but to me, it's everything. My life exists to inspire and motivate people to help them reach their full potential. You know why I woke up this morning and didn't stay in bed? Because my life exists to inspire other people. I saw the podcast on my schedule this morning and I went, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that today. Yeah. I know some things I've got to do this afternoon that are a little difficult. They're not in my strength zone. They're not in my skill set. To be honest with you, they're not in my appetite for my agenda. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do them. You know why? Because I exist to multiply, inspire, motivate, and inspire people to reach their full potential. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing it because my parents, my relationships, others around me want to do it. I'm doing it because it is what wakes me up in the morning. It's what keeps me up at night. And that was found by answering these questions. What is my desire? What are my talents? What are my opportunities? And I found answers to those questions by growing myself, surrounding myself in a growth environment, and writing out a plan for personal growth. For me, Tracy, the answer for those 2 questions were so symbiotic that I can't separate them in the answering.
Uh-huh. And you know how, let me just tell those of you who are listening and you're aligning what Mark's saying up to your own life and you're trying to think, does that fit for me? Does that fit with what my personal life purpose is? And I would just say to you, when you are in that zone and you are growing in that zone, it is going to be, you will have hard times. It's not like it's just all smooth sailing when you're growing in your sweet spot and in your purpose. But there will be times when you'll feel like your hair's on fire. You're so outside of your comfort zone. But you will also at the same time feel so deeply fulfilled. So like Mark said, called out of bed in the morning. Sometimes I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and I check my phone on my night table. I'll turn it over and I'll see like what time it is. And I think, is it too early to get up yet? Yeah, my body probably, I know what I need to do today, and I probably need a little bit more sleep, but sometimes I'm so excited to get into my day. I remember my mom saying that. Like, I look forward to waking up in the morning because I can't wait to get into my day and what I do. That is somebody who is driven by purpose and every day getting up to do your purpose, so that while you might have days where you feel stressed or you might feel out of your zone or like your hair's on fire because you're so uncomfortable because you're out of your comfort zone, you're still on, your heart's on fire. You're excited to get up and get into it. And when you are in a growth environment where other people are in that same space, it even pulls you deeper. What's that quote? I'm going to misquote it, but John always says, like, when you are out of, when you're in the deep waters, it doesn't matter how deep you are. It's like once you go out of the shallow zone, it doesn't matter how deep the water is. Just keep going.
He also says, Tracy, he says that he doesn't wake up out of discipline. He wakes up out of anticipation.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, for me, that happened as I began to discover the return on personal growth and the clarity of a personal vision and purpose statement. And that anticipation, and that's what I really want you to have at the end of this, is this pursuit for growth, this pursuit for clarity in your purpose. Success will come with those things.
That's exactly right. And another thing I'd like to touch on, and I know this is something that's important to you, is practicing generosity. Yeah. And this is something that John does, I think, perhaps better than anyone. I mean, that's why he's a mentor to both of us. I am drawn in by John's generosity. He is just such a generous human being. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about his spirit of generosity. When you are around John, you just feel his care, his concern for you. You can tell he's prepared, he's looked forward, he's anticipated spending time with you. And that is something that, to me, draws me in, and I want to be like that. I want to make other people feel the way I feel when I'm with John, because he is so generous in his spirit. Can you talk a little bit about generosity and what that looks like for you in your leadership and in your personal life?
Yeah, and I can give you a funny story that just happened this past weekend. We're recording this now, and John and I were just traveling together. And and so this all backs up John's statement that I want us all to get, and I will tell you this story. But he said generosity is not a bank account. It is an attitude. And so many people think that when they reach a certain earning threshold, or when they pay off their car, their house, or when I start making real money, for all you college students out there listening, I'll start being generous then. Yeah, maybe. But it won't be because you got money. It'll be because you got an attitude of generosity. There's a big difference in a big bank account and people that have no generosity, and a small bank account with people that are abundant at everything that they do. John this week, and John's really taught me to, by standards, over-tip, over-express appreciation to those that are in the service industry. And so we were at a really nice hotel this past weekend, and the guy helped us with our luggage. He helped us with this. He did a lot of great things. And so I gave him a very generous, like, John Maxwell inspired tip. I mean, I gave him like a really nice tip for what he had helped me with that day. And the guy was just blown away. He said, Mr. Cole, thank you. We came down one day later. Mr. Cole, thank you. We came down the next day, and he said, Mr. Cole, you've just been so good, so nice. Thank you very much. Well, then I watched John slip over behind the car and slip him what I knew was a $100 bill. And he got back in the car, and I said, he remembered your name too. Why are you trying to get him to quit being so appreciative to me? He said, Mark, it just struck me. This is him. This is him. And I cut up with him, and we had this crazy sense of humor. But I was acting like he was trying to trump me and being more generous, out-tip me and get more affirmation from the guy that was serving us with our luggage and all that. And I said, John, why'd you just out-tip me? And he said, anybody that appreciates something so much as he did the first day we got here probably has a need, Mark, bigger than you and I could imagine. And I just felt compelled that I need to go double and triple what you had done for a guy that was showing that much generosity. And I went, golly, what a brilliant, I mean, I'm not making this just happened. What a brilliant attitude of generosity. John goes, man, this guy is so grateful. I bet you a little bit more generosity would go a long way in this young man's life. Because we're in a city that has truly been shut down until recently. If he's dependent on tips, he's probably accumulated a lot of bills. And my relatively generous tip to him inspired John to a greater letter of generosity, not because he wanted to outgive, not because he has a big bank account, but because he has a heart, a spirit of generosity. Mm-hmm. And Tracy, you said it at the beginning, and we're speaking in John's absence here, but I've never experienced the level of generosity that I see on a daily basis with John Maxwell, and I want to experience that.
I do too. And we can all start practicing that now. Even if you don't have money, the resources financially, you can start with your time. You can start with being generous with love and kindness toward people. That, not everybody's kind to people, especially, gosh, you just go out. There's a lot of angst with people right now because of those bills, because people haven't been able to work. There's a lot of angst in private lives. And so when you're generous with kindness to people, you can just see how they're taken aback and they're grateful for it. And so imagine if we're giving 2 and 3 times more generosity and kindness towards people, right. How that's going to be. I'll toss it back to you, but the last thing that I really want to share with people is the other day when I had a phone call with John, I would just want to share with our audience what he shared with me because it was greatly impactful for me and I wrote it down. And he said to me, Tracy, I have found that most people do better when they're believed in. He said, wow. I do better when people believe in me. And I've just found that most people do better when people believe in them. And he said, so I want to believe in people so that they can do better. And I thought that's a generosity again, but it's also valuing people. And what a lesson. And so I share it with you because it's impacted me. And that private conversation, I'm sure he said it to many people too, but I share it with all of our listeners because what a beautiful lesson.
Yeah, it's how successful people think. I mean, you're sitting here and we're truly, rightly so, taking a lot of time talking about success, but showing you how success is really all about others. It's really about significance. And we're taking a lot of time here at the end of this to show you how successful people think. Mm-hmm. And you don't gain success and then all of a sudden start thinking. You think your way along until you see that level of success. And so John wrote a book, How Successful People Think. In fact, Jake, I'd like to make that available to everybody. Let's put it in our show notes. We'll put a link. You go to that link, put in a promo code podcast, and we'll give you 15% off of this book, How Successful People Think. I want to give you that next step because listening to this podcast is one thing, but getting into your awareness, how you should be thinking is truly one of the first and major steps on your way to a successful life, on a way to successful decisions and processing life from a successful perspective. So I want you to take that book and get it because, again, we're talking about generosity. We're talking about John. You quoted John, gave us an experience of John, Tracy. There is this unbelievable sense of fulfillment that will come to you as you realize that your life has substance, that your life has significance, that your life is successful. And we want you to have that here. That's our passion. I love to share a podcast comment from a listener that said, this is actually from Lena. Lena also, a few weeks ago, I referenced somebody from episode 200. It was a good lesson. We want you to listen to that. We'll put it in the show notes. But Lena was listening to episode 200. She said, hey, thank you so much for the link to the 21 Laws. I've been listening to this podcast while posting payroll every Wednesday. And I've been doing this every morning for the last 3 years. I can't begin to count how many changes, small and big, I have made in the last 3 years that has been directly influenced by the podcast. Thank you and good work. And Lena.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.